the reasons we're so excited to share the no drama discipline approach with you is because it will give you the tools and the lens to see kids' behaviors differently and to know how to respond to them in ways that help you survive the moment, but also help your children thrive in the long run. And the truth is, really the best parents we can be ourselves in terms of who we are is that we are intentional. Mm-hmm. And when we make mistakes, when things get messy, we have the opportunity to repair with our children, to learn more about ourselves. And what we're really hoping for this book is not only to help shift the way people see behavior, see the way that we all respond to our kids differently, but to really shape and change the cultural conversation about what discipline actually is. Because so much of the time, what we do as parents in response to our children and in the name of discipline is actually counterproductive to learning. Mm-hmm. A lot of times the things we do actually are counter to learning. And so it's a whole different frame of mind. It's a whole different way of looking at behavior differently and responding differently with tons of grace for ourselves and compassion for our children.
بینندگان درود به شما به برنامه مامتاک خوش آمدید. برنامه‌ای که امروز براتون تهیه دیدیم برنامه‌ای هست در رابطه با موضوع مهم دیسیپلین. میدونم برای خیلی از شما دیسیپلین، به خصوص شما مادران و پدران ایرانی یا ایرانی آمریکایی، وقتی دیسیپلین رو میشنوین فکر میکنین در رابطه با بچه‌هایی هستن که سر به زیر، obedient و حرف گوش کن به قول معروف و بچه‌هایی هستن که وقتی که پدر و مادر ازشون یه کاری رو میخوان انجام میدن. اطاعت، بله قربان. و این شیوه دیسیپلین شیوهی هستش که شاید 2 نسل گذشته در رابطه با مادر بزرگا و پدر بزرگای ما دیدیم و شاهدش بودیم. امروزه دیسیپلین معنای جدیدی داره. امروزه مادران و پدران جدید دیسیپلین رو در رابطه با یادگیری و اون رابطه‌ای که بین مادر و پدر و کودک در رابطه با یادگیری انجام میگیره. امروز خیلی خوشحال هستم که به اصطلاح پیشکسوت و ساینتیست، محقق، روانشناس، روانکاو بسیار بسیار نازنین از کسانی که ایشون تحقیقاتشون رو در رابطه با علم و علوم به اصطلاح interpersonal neurobiology، رابطه بین کودک و مادر و پدر و اینکه چگونه ما میتوانیم دیسیپلین رو بدون دراما، بدون مشکل، بدون به اصطلاح یک نوع کش بین مادر و پدر انجام بدیم. دکتر تینا برایسن، نویسنده، آثر و به اصطلاح پیشروی این زمینه هستند که امروز میهمان برنامه هستند. در کنار ایشون دوست گرامی من روما کتارپال که ایشون فاوندر Tools of Growth هستند و همیشه در رابطه با mindfulness و connecting the dots، integration, bringing relationships and friendships together. امروز میخوایم در کنار شما ما 3 مادر متفاوت با کودکان در سنای متفاوت developmentally این conversation رو با شما داشته باشیم. در دوره به اصطلاح گفتگومون من بریک خواهم گرفت و مطالبی رو برای شما بینندگان گرامی ترنسلیت خواهم کرد. Tina, Roma, welcome to MomTalk.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Such an honor. Yeah. All right, well, let's get to it. No drama discipline. I was just talking about how in certain cultures, given, you know, the nature of the epigenetics or how discipline has been defined, obedience is oftentimes equated with discipline. Yes. So a good, obedient child is one who's well-mannered and has good discipline.
Yes.
I certainly can look back 2 generations back where, you know, my grandparents were disciplining. And for them, you know, children who were proper, they had good manners, and they listened well.
Good kids.
Good kids.
Yes.
The good kids. And oftentimes, intelligence in those cultures is related to level of obedience. So here we are in a very different world, in America, modern life, a modern, parent, mindful parents, and we're trying to raise our children and redefining, reevaluating what discipline means.
Yes.
So tell us about the no drama discipline and your approach.
When I talk to audiences and I ask them, what is the word you most associate with the word discipline? What I hear is the word punishment. And so when Dan and I were writing the book, we had to ask ourselves, what are we going to call this book? And we actually had a colleague who recommended that we not use the word discipline in the title, because the concern is that we are sort of furthering that idea that punishment is the thing to do. But what Dan and I decided was that we wanted to shift the thinking, the whole culture around the meaning of children's behavior and what discipline is about. And if you go to the root of the word, it's really about teaching, and I like to add in the idea of skill building.
Right.
And what's so exciting about this approach is that if we can shift our thinking in a moment when our child is either not doing something they're supposed to be doing or doing something that they shouldn't be doing, those are kind of the two moments of discipline all the time, that in those moments our children are communicating to us the areas they still need teaching and skill building. And I think the key is, there's a problem with thinking about obedience as the goal, because ultimately we don't want our children to grow up to be obedient to the adults
Or
around
compliant,
them.
for that matter. Right,
There's
right.
dangers to
Of
that
course,
even.
of course.
So what we want to think about, what I like to think about as kind of the end goal, is the idea of self-discipline. So that they, when no one's looking, when they come across moments that are difficult, that they do the right thing, the thing that they know is right for them and for other people, naturally. But that requires the brain to get wired to consider other people and to reflect on our options and what the consequences. And for sure, that's the basis of everything. But that can't happen without skill building and teaching. And we often tell kids, like, don't do that or knock it off. But they maybe don't have a strategy or a different way to do it. They're just responding to the emotions that are kind of happening in the moment.
And most of it, I think, Tina, is a learned habit.
Yes.
You talk about the elf on the shelf,
Yeah.
which I'd love for you to share that too,
Yeah.
because I think that really makes it real for parents to dial into what our habits are, how we were raised, and how we're bringing that fear-based parenting to the platform.
Yeah, I think, at least in my generation, and for sure generations before, there was this thinking that a healthy dose of fear was a kind of a good idea. And
very cultural for us too, right? In our cultures.
Still is, yeah.
And I think there's a problem with that, and that is what I guess I'd like to think about it more, a healthy dose of having a good conscience, like a good healthy conscience where you're considering how your behavior affects other people. And the problem with fear is that fear is the opposite of learning. When we are in fear states, our brain goes into more of a reactive state where it's less likely we actually learn. So it's counterproductive to our goal of discipline, which is to teach and to build skills. And there are these things, obviously, we can think about fear as parents who are really terrifying, who humiliate or hurt their children or who scream at them and those kinds of things. But there are more subtle forms of fear that we use in everyday culture that a lot of people haven't thought about as using fear to control behavior, which obviously we would never want our kids to use fear to control their peers. So we're sort of modeling sometimes skills we wouldn't want our kids to replicate.
Right. All the time.
All the time. And so I think, when we think about the holidays and we tell children, Santa's watching you. If you're not good, you're going to get coal in your stocking or you won't get presents. Or the elf on the shelf who's going to give this kind of report about good behavior and bad behavior.
Or here comes the police
Or
car,
here
right?
comes the police car, or
fire engine,
right? Or one of the other subtle kinds of things we might do. And elf on the shelf can be fun if we use it in a fun way. But when we threaten our children, and we do it in kind of culturally accepted ways, like when we can't get our child to leave a store with us, and what we say is, okay, well, I'm leaving now, which is basically like threatening our child, like, I'm going to leave you in this scary place where I've already warned you there might be dangerous people.
Right.
So we use these fear-based things, and so the child may comply in the moment, but there's a cost to that. What it actually communicates to the child is, my parent's a little unpredictable, or they might be scary, or they use power and control to get me to do things, instead of doing what we know is so important for the developing brain, which is, I feel safe and that my caregiver is predictable most of the time, you know? And so I think using fear to control is really counter to what we're wanting to do. Instead, in that moment, you have a child who won't come with you. You do some reflective dialogue before you go in, or you have a plan, or you come up with playful creativity like, okay, as soon as we get back to the car, I'm going to tell you the funniest joke I know, or I'm going to start a story now, but I'm not going to finish it until we get back in the car. So we set ourselves up for success in more playful ways, because we do need our kids to do what we need them to do, whether they like it or not sometimes.
Because we need to do what we need to do, right? And they're with us, so by default.
Exactly.
Yeah, what I noticed with our 3 children is the temperament plays a key role. So our son, he was born a certain way. He regulates very well. He very seldom has his brain flipping.
Flip your lid.
Yeah, so he's just that kind of kid. He's very regulated, very, the discipline, the learning, those skills were built in. He was
natural to him.
Natural.
Yeah.
Our daughters, different tendencies. So our oldest, she is more of a risk taker, but she has a huge imagination. She's innovative. She is expressive. She's all about the relationship.
Yeah.
She's plugged in, but she likes to explore. She's that joyful, free-spirited kid who wants to go out there. And you hope, as a parent, I oftentimes just hold myself back and I say, just like breathe, it's okay.
Trust
She's gonna
it's
be
going to be
okay.
okay.
Trust and surrender.
Yes.
But there are times that I'm worried about her because
course.
she is a risk taker, and sometimes, I want to protect her. I'm the parent.
Of course.
And so I do have these long conversations and repeat those conversations. I've repeated them for years now. Sometimes they work and sometimes they don't.
Yeah.
When they don't, it's often related to her level of regulation.
Yeah.
If she's worked or overscheduled or tired. And we both are. Oftentimes there's a parallel process.
Course.
Those moments are the most challenging moments to discipline because I want to be the teacher and calm and be able to, but it's hard. And my brain is,
I think one of the
How do
things,
we bring it together?
I think one of the things that's so important is if we really buy into this idea that discipline is about teaching and skill building so that they have those skills to do it for themselves and that we're building the brain in that way, then before we move into a discipline moment, which can happen multiple times a day, to stop and ask ourselves, is my child ready to learn right now, and am I ready to teach? Because the brain is either in a receptive state or it's in a reactive state, right?
Yes.
And so...
And I love the 3 questions that you say that can help you get started.
What is it I want my child to learn here? What's going on behind the behavior? What's this really about? And what do I really want them to learn?
The why, the what, and the how,
and then how's the most effective way to teach it?
So let's teach our audience because we have viewers, young parents who are now watching. دوستان این لحظه it's a teachable moment. Dr. Tina Bryson, No Drama Discipline به شما یاد خواهند داد که چگونه در اون اوقاتی که شاید کودک شما، فرزند شما آمادگی یادگیری نداره و یا شاید شما باید evaluate بکنین و ببینین که آیا شما آمادگی دارین، ایشون آمادگی داره و چگونه دیسیپلین که یادگیری یا یاد دادن هستش، آموزش و پرورش هست، در اون لحظه شما انجام بدین یا انجام ندین. بنابراین ایشون به شما توضیح خواهند داد دقیق step by step و گوش بکنین که این مطالب رو بتونین در رابطتون با فرزندتون اپلای بکنین. So go ahead and teach our audience the way they can apply these skills into their parenting relationship.
Well, I would say, the first thing we want to ask in the moment is your child receptive and ready to learn in that moment? And the second question is, am I ready to teach? So if we are in reactive states, or our child is in reactive states, or if you're dealing with a situation with siblings where one of them is in a reactive state, that is not the best time. And one of the most effective things we can do is to think about timing. And, we've been taught often that we have to address a behavior right there in the moment or a child won't learn, but that is actually not true. That's based on really old research primarily done on animals.
Right.
You know, back in the operant conditioning behaviorist kind of movement.
Right.
And so I think starting with that question is really important. And then when it's time, when you say, yes, I'm ready to teach, yes, my child is open and receptive to learning, then we can reflect and ask, what's really going on here? What's underneath the behavior? And I think one of the most important things we can bring to the discipline process is curiosity.
Yes.
Right.
And to kind of say, what's going on? Because behavior is purposeful. We have a reason for doing what we do most of the time. Even if it's crazy acting out behavior, it makes sense if you really understand what's happening.
And I also love that you say that the behavior is a back burner issue.
It
It's the
is.
relationship,
Yes.
that's
Yes.
the front burner issue.
Yes.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
that's where the focus should be, in the moment
That's
to
right.
moment,
Yeah.
because parenting and building relationships, this is all right here, right now, in the moment as you go along. And I think if we keep that perspective,
Yeah.
then obviously we'll have, we'll parent more effectively.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I really believe that for the most part, most humans, but especially children, want to do well. And they do
Yes.
well when they can. And when they don't, it's because something is happening. And so I really believe that when children are falling apart and acting out, which often looks like really bad behavior.
Right,
It might
right.
look like, I hate you, you're stupid, really disrespectful. Or it might look like throwing something across the room or hitting a sibling. It can look like really bad behavior. That in those moments, our children have stress hormones pumping through their bodies. And if we think about times we feel out of control, it's pretty miserable. And what we know from the attachment research is that when we are in states of distress, that is when we most need connection and relationship.
Right.
So one of the ways that Dan and I are talking about this idea of that the brain is either in a receptive state or in a reactive state. We have a new book coming out in October called The Yes Brain, and we've been teaching this idea for a long time, but this is the first time it'll be written for us, is the idea that we can kind of monitor where our children are in terms of this reactive or this receptive state. And there are a lot of different people who have different versions of this, but the way I like to teach it is to think about in the middle, this what we call the green zone. And in the green zone, we're flexible and adaptive, coherent, we do what makes sense, energized and stable. That's from the river of well-being that's in the whole brain child. And so we're in a state of integration where even if we're frustrated or scared, we can still handle ourselves well. We can still make choices. And when we're in the green zone, our bodies are relaxed and our heart rate is kind of pattering along and we're breathing at a normal rate. And then there are two reactive states that we can think about. So that's the receptive. One reactive state is kind of, we think about a red strip above the green. So it's like red, green, and then I'm going to talk about blue. And in the red zone, this is hyper arousal. So our nervous system is dialed up. Our heart's beating really fast. Our muscles get really tense. Our face gets really intense.
What is our brain doing at this point?
Well, what happens is we're not really using our prefrontal lobe.
Right.
We're dropping down into subcortical or below the cortex into more reactive kind of reptilian kinds of states. We're not thinking. So what that means is the part of our brain, our frontal lobe, or what we call the upstairs brain, that regulates our body and our emotions and thinks about other people with empathy and has insight and makes good decisions and all of those things kind of goes offline. And
Flip
so,
the lid.
so
Yes,
we
yes.
move into fight, flight, and freeze. We act like we are under threat and our bodies take that on. You can see red zone a mile away. Kids are like,
Yeah.
right? And we sometimes red zone too.
Sure,
And it's
of
very
course, of
contagious.
course, yeah.
Beware, it's contagious. So that's one way, and that's where a lot of misbehavior happens.
Right.
The other is hypoarousal, which is the blue zone, and this is where we actually shut down and kind of go into collapse. And so what happens is when we are in the red zone or in the blue zone, we are not really able to learn in those moments.
Right.
So
and it's counterproductive.
it's
This type of discipline is
counterproductive.
counterproductive.
Yeah, and if you think about what we often have an instinct to do in the moment as parents, whether that is, so let's say, let me give a really specific example, because that's always fun.
Sure.
So, and my kids misbehave, shocker, right? They all do because they're humans. and I misbehave sometimes.
My kids are
too.
25 and 28, and they
still-
misbehave.
Yes.
They're listening to me now and going, "Stop it."
That's right. That's right. And
adults.
you're going. Okay, peel back the layers. What's happening underneath there? Stay in the green zone.
Yeah, what happened 0 to 6?
Exactly. So, just to give an example, so one time when my 6-year-old and my 9-year-old were, and I have 3 boys who are now 16, 13, and 10, but a few years ago, my youngest got really mad. His brother they were on the phone with their grandparents, and my young guy started to tell a story, and his older brother just totally took over and bulldozed, and so he didn't get to tell his story. And so he was really mad about it, and then he said, Luke, I wanted to tell the story. And Luke said, too bad, who cares? So he tried to use his voice, and the brother was mean on top of it.
I already know Luke's personality because he asked for ice cream
Yes.
on your Facebook
Yes,
Live. I thought that was so cute.
I know. He's my middle schooler who's very funny. And,
Yeah.
So in that moment, JP was reining it in and kind of trying to stay green as long as he could. But then when Luke got, kind of came down on him, he flipped his lid. And when he flipped his lid, he slapped Luke really hard on the back, so much so that he left a handprint. So Luke came into the bathroom where I was brushing my teeth, and he showed me his back, and I said, oh my gosh, that must really hurt. And so I soothed Luke in that moment, right? So I come around the corner, and JP is standing there, totally red zone. Muscles are tense, eyes are big, he's gritting his teeth. I know his breathing and his heart rate are going like crazy. Now, here's this discipline moment. So what do I do? Well, the first moment is I have to make sure I'm green. And my instinct in that moment is usually counterproductive to what he needs. Okay, so here are some options. In that moment, as parents, we might decide to say, well, I'm going to show you what it feels like to be hurt, and we might spank our children. 95% of children are spanked, at least once by the time
As
they're
much as
3.
we're in denial about that, right?
Yeah, I mean, 50% of parents are anti-spanking in the U.S., but 95% of children are spanked at least once by 3.
Too,
So it's kind of a universal childhood experience. So we might spank. What happens if we spank? What happens if we yell? Like, my instinct in the moment is to say, why would you do that? Why did you hit your brother? You know we don't hit in this house. And to yell. That was my instinct in the moment. But when we yell or we spank or we say, I'm taking away all your fun for the rest of the day. Go to your room. You can't have your play time this afternoon. Or whatever we do in the moment. Those things actually send kids further up into the red zone. And in the name of discipline, and of course by that I mean teaching and skill building, my number one job is to get my kid back into the green zone. That's the survive goal. And the thrive goal is to expand his green zone over time so that as development unfolds and his brother does something that makes him mad, he can tolerate it more and he can come up with other solutions, right?
Building their
so
grit,
that's the skill
right?
building.
Sure,
that's the skill building. So in this moment, how do we get our kids back into a state where they can be receptive and learn so that we can be effective disciplinarians, teachers?
Yes.
So again, it's not typically my first instinct, but I know what works. I know what works from a brain and nervous system standpoint. And what we have to know about the brain and the nervous system is when we're in this fight, flight, freeze, or in this collapse state, what is most effective in bringing us back into regulation and connection and integration is connection.
Right.
And when, as human beings, someone brings empathy and compassion to us when we're in our biggest states of distress, it turns down that dial of arousal. And so
And emotional intelligence comes into play here too, right?
Oh, we have to attune, and because sometimes we might be playful, but it makes our kid more upset, or those kinds of things. So what that looked like in the moment, practically in this moment, when I was green, and I'm not always, sometimes I flip my lid and I yell, and of course when we rupture, the most important thing is repair. So what that looked like in the moment, now obviously I'm not thinking this in the moment, but when our children are physically hurt, we're usually really good at saying, oh, come here, what happened, and comforting. And if we can think about this big behavioral outburst where they're also in emotional distress, to have a similar kind of response. So what I did in that moment was I came around the corner, he's like, and here I am, I need to address the perpetrator. This is a discipline moment. And so I say, oh, JP, you're so mad. You're so mad. Come here, what happened? Another phrase I like to use is, you're so angry. What do you need right now? Because that becomes their internal voice later for themselves, like, I'm really upset, what do I need right now? So he's like, Luke did this and I'm so mad. And I said, oh, and you used your words and he still didn't respond in a good way. That must have been so frustrating. So what's actually happening, if we kind of break that down, is his internal response and my response to him are a match.
Right.
If instead I say, why are you making such a big deal about this? Who cares? Or you're being so sensitive, then my response is not matching what his internal experience is. So when I give him empathy and validation about his experience, he can start to calm down. I'm offering him that connection. And really one of the most powerful ways we can do that is less through our words and more through what we would call more right hemisphere nonverbal kinds of things, like the giving a left brain report like, I can see you're really mad right now, you're very frustrated, is a totally different experience than me saying, oh, you're so mad and frustrated.
And what happens if you're mad and frustrated and you flip the lid?
Yes.
You know, taking that moment to get yourself into that zone.
That pause.
What are the tools that you might have to help parents self-regulate
so
first?
Hard.
Right?
It's so hard.
It is.
It's
so hard.
It's worked with, finding that center, that focal point for me in those moments where you lost consciousness, really.
Sure.
Is getting back to the hub. And, Dan talks about the wheel of awareness and how, we really, if we practice and stay connected to the rim and the hub and know where the hub is and try and connect from hub to hub during those moments. For me, that's been really a turning point where in the moments, peak moments when I'm totally frustrated and angry, I'm able to connect and see through their spheres and how they're experiencing it. Now, sometimes it's challenging because in teachable moments, or when you're trying to discipline in teaching, I also feel like I have a social responsibility to also stand up for, say, if a friend is involved or a sibling is involved, and teaching them to be more conscious in those moments and choices. And sometimes developmentally, I feel like they're not ready for some of those teachings, going back to your point, readiness, right?
That's right.
Are they ready to be taught?
That's
or
right.
Am I ready? And I notice that when I take those moments to pause and just do nothing, just to be present and just quiet down myself as well as slow it down.
Yeah.
It really works wonderful.
Yeah.
It does. This reminds me of a time that I had with my son. I think it was maybe 12, and he had his sister was in the bus with him, and he had thrown 10, I think. He had thrown a CD. She asked for a CD, and he threw it back. And of course, there are other kids in the bus, and he got suspended from the bus for X amount of time, for I think a week or something.
Wow.
And it was punishment for me because
you had to
I had to drive him. He was very happy being off the bus.
Right.
He was very happy.
It was punishment for you.
But I remember when he came home, and when I found this out, the conversation that I had with him was, I want to know why you did it. And he looked at me and he said, I don't know.
I don't know.
I said, no, I mean,
That's
what
a
do you mean
real
you don't
answer.
know? Tell me why you did it. This is much before I had that self-regulation for myself. And I remember asking him a couple times, and I'm telling myself, aren't you listening to his honest response? He doesn't know
He really doesn't.
why he did it.
That's
he
true.
really doesn't know why he did it.
Yeah.
So I did this. I took a deep breath, and I said, all right, you know what you're doing. So, don't go there. Let's try to match this up and get down to how he's feeling first. And then go to, and you call it connect and redirect.
Yes.
Right? And then go to, and even in my book, I talk about reflect, redirect, and then reconnect. So you're reflecting on yourself, reconnecting with yourself, and then you can redirect the child, in doing the exact same thing. So,
and often the phrase I'll use there is to say, I know you normally wouldn't talk to me that way, or you normally wouldn't hurt somebody. So what was going on with that? Let's be curious about that together. And that kind of opens it up, as opposed to, why did you do that? That's a totally different kind of question. But I think, the whole idea of how do we get ourselves to that place and slowing it down, all that fits together, because, what's so important is we do need to address the behavior. I'm not going to just soothe my child and then let it go, because then we're missing the teaching moment. So I want to talk about what I feel like has worked the most for the most people, but I want to finish up this piece about what happened with JP where, you know, I said what happened, he told me, I validated the feelings, because we do have a social responsibility to think about how their behavior impacts others. And so what's key though is when we're in the red zone or the blue zone, we can't do it. It's not, for sure it's developmentally, sometimes they're not ready, but in the moment they may not be ready too, because, you know, had I said to JP when he was in the red zone, you know, you really hurt Luke, and he would have been like, good, I wish I had hurt him more.
Right.
He doesn't, we don't have empathy when we feel wounded and when we feel reactive. So what I needed to do first before JP could get to empathy was to soothe how he had been wounded. Like that was, Luke shouldn't have done that to you.
Right.
And when he felt like that was heard, then something really powerful happened. I was able to say, I paused, I slowed things down, and then I said, you really hurt Luke. And I paused again. And you know what happened is he did this. He went, and when that happened, that was the most powerful discipline moment.
Right.
Because that feeling of, it's not shame. Shame is like, I'm a defective person. But healthy guilt, or what we call
Feeling
a healthy
sorry.
conscience, is to say, ooh, that doesn't feel good that I did that to somebody else. That doesn't feel right with me. That doesn't sit well with
Empathy
me.
in place, sure.
And that was intrinsic.
And it was intrinsic. And it's one of the most powerful things that changes our behavior because it's a really unpleasant feeling and your brain wires that connected to that behavior. And I'm not universally against consequences. I think we have to be really thoughtful. And I think most of the way we use consequences is not helpful.
Of course.
I think there are exceptions to it that could be helpful at times. And I'm a big fan of natural consequences where, you know, if you leave your bike outside and it gets wet, your butt's going to get wet when you sit on it. And that's, you know. But I think that what happens when we impose a consequence, like had I said to JP, I'm taking away your play date this afternoon, all of his attention would have gone to how mean I am to do this to him, instead of keeping his attention on that internal feeling he was having.
It derails them
It
from
does.
learning about themselves.
It counters what we're trying to
Sure.
do to teach. And so in that moment when I say, you really hurt Luke, and he does this, I can hold his attention there by being quiet, and then by also saying, I can see you feel bad that you hurt Luke.
Right.
And then pause again, and then say, how can you make things right with him?
Okay, let me translate. Take a moment. برای شما دوستان که توجه میکنین یک تجربه به خصوص دکتر برایسن با فرزندان خودشون داشتن، با 3 فرزندشون 3 پسر دارن و در این به اصطلاح سیچویشن، در این موقعیت پسر بزرگترشون پسر کوچیکترشون رو از پشت زد با دستش، طوری که جای دستش پشتش موند و خیلی ناراحت بود. پسر کوچیک میاد به مادر گریه کنون میگه که برادرم منو زد و ناراحت هستش و ایشون میگن که در اون لحظه که من پسر کوچکم رو میبینم که ناراحت هستش و در حال گریه کردن هستش، خب اولین اینستینکت یا غریزه من این هستش که برم و پسر بزرگم رو پانش بکنم و تنبیه بکنم، بگم که صدامو بلند بکنم، بگم که چرا زدی پسرم رو یا چرا این کارو کردی، کاری که خیلی از شاید شما این کارو میکنین. ولی در اون لحظه به خصوص به خاطر اینکه ایشون بک‌گراندشون نوروساینس هستش و اینترپرسونال نوروبیولوژی رو خیلی خوب میدونن که 3 به اصطلاح لول یا درجه مختلف هست که مغز یا اعصاب درش کار میکنه، فعالیت میکنه. اون قسمت میانه که سبز هستش، گرین زون اسم این نقطه رو گذاشتن، اونجا کودک یا فرزند شما، نوجوان شما میتونه یاد بگیره، میتونه مغزش رشد بکنه، میتونه اون گفتگویی رو که شما با او دارین بفهمه و امپاتی تجربه بکنه و ببینه که رابطهش رو چگونه میتونه ایمپروو بکنه، رابطهش رو به صورت سازنده پیش ببره. در اون نقطه هستش که کودک یا نوجوان شما میتونه به اصطلاح مغزش رشد بکنه. لحظه‌ای که شما عصبانی هستین یا او عصبانی هستش، همونطور که مادر میرن و نوجوان رو میبینن که خیلی به اصطلاح متحول و برانگیخته هستش، قرمز شده صورتش، تمام دندوناش عصبانی هستش. تو اون لحظه عصبانیت یا عصبانی یا جوشی به قول سلنگ صحبتایی که جوونا امروزه میکنن، جوشی شد طرف، تو اون لحظه یادگیری میشه گفت که غیر ممکن هستش، محال هستش. در اون لحظه که یکی جوشی هستش نمیتونه یاد بگیره. بنابراین کار مادر، وظیفه مادر این هستش که مغز رو آروم بکنه، به درجه سبز و یا اون متعادل و میانه بیاره. در اون پیشرو ایشون میره و نگاه میکنه، میرورینگ بهش میگه که میبینم که تو عصبانی هستی، ناراحت هستی، ولی در کنار اون شاید او رو در آغوشش میگیره، بغلش میکنه، آرومش میکنه و او این حس رو میکنه که دوباره با مادر کانکشن داره. در اون کانکشن بعد میگه که بگو ببینم چی شد، چه اتفاقی افتاد اینجا. و در اون گفتگو هستش که حالا ایشون مادر میتونه یاد بده، میتونه بگه خب چی شد، و در اون لحظه نوجوان ایشون سرش رو میندازه پایین و با ناراحتی یا با یک احساس گناه میگه که من متاسفم که برادرم هرت شد یا اذیت شد با این رفتار بد من. و در اون لحظه هستش که ایشون اشاره میکنن intrinsic motivation for learning یا skill building در درونش این جوشیده و بیرون اومده و در مغز او from the inside out این رشد و تحول صورت میگیره. Such an important point, and for parents to really get the connection. It's counterintuitive.
It is.
It's counterintuitive. And so for parents to make that shift, and this is where mindfulness...
It's relearning us, right? It's relearning about
Especially
ourselves.
with certain epigenetics, I think certain cultural upbringings, because again, punishment has been at the core center of learning.
Yeah.
And so we're unlearning and relearning and evolving in a healthy way.
Yeah.
And this is where mindfulness and the practice of mindsight becomes so valuable.
It is, and you were talking about the hub and how helpful it can be for us, because it is, most of what's instinctual for us in the discipline moment is counterproductive for discipline.
Yes, absolutely.
So this is where it does. It requires
Right on.
intention and mindfulness
Sure,
and practice.
Yes.
To rewire our own brains for what, and I have to say,
And it's a skill that needs to be built.
And I'm better at it now. I mean, now my kids are older, so there's
Takes
not
some
as many
time.
tantrums. But,
Sure.
but it does. It takes time. And I think when you talk about the hub, it makes me think about how one of the things that's been so helpful to me, myself, but also as I am teaching, is this idea, and this will be in the new book as well. Another way we can think about that is you're in the middle of an experience as the person who's experiencing it. Like, I'm so mad at my kid right now. My kid's making things really hard on me. And she's screaming about this. So you're in the middle of the experience. But then there's also another level of processing where we can also at the same time be the observer of that experience and be like, oh, it's so interesting. I'm noticing we're both kind of freaking out right now.
Right,
And I imagine myself like as I'm driving my
Mindsight
minivan, like
portion of
hovering
it.
above the minivan, like narrating, like sportscasting what's happening, and it helps me. But I think the thing that is probably from No Drama Discipline that has been the thing that has helped the most people, that sometimes it's really impossible to get to the hub because we have flipped our lid.
Sure.
And so one of the tools that's more bottom up, more body based, that's been probably the thing that most people go, oh my gosh, that's magic, is this idea that when a child is really starting to lose their minds, they're starting to tantrum, and by the way, this works really well on our significant others too, is to actually get below eye level, not at eye level, but to get below eye level. So I was working with this family, a 5-year-old son who had these meltdowns all the time, and part of the reason that's important to kind of be thinking about this is we wanted to peel back the layers. Why is he out of his green zone so much?
Right.
Is that developmentally appropriate, or is there something else going on? And that's what we do in our clinical work, is to figure out those pieces with parents. And this boy in particular had some sensory sensitivity. So he had a really narrow green zone, and it didn't take much to send him red zone. And his dad would get really red zone too. And so the boy would say, like, I want the red mug. And his dad would say, you can't have it, it's in the dishwasher. And they would, instead of co-regulating, they would co-escalate. And dad would scream and have a scary look on his face and an aggressive posture and yell. And that would send both of them into a lose-lose situation. So I started working with this family, and I said to the dad, how could we communicate to your child's brain no threat and connection and comfort? How could we do that in the most quick way? And I actually thought about my own dog, who had a trauma history. We adopted him, and I thought about this experiment. So I said to the dad, the next time your child is raging, I want you to sit below eye level in a really relaxed posture. I said, you won't feel like it. You'll feel like yelling. But I want you to just sit, lean back or sit with your legs crossed on the floor. And I want you to stop talking so much, and I want you to only say 2 things. Number 1, something empathetic, like you're really mad right now. I see that you're really having a hard time. And the second thing is to say something really powerful, which is, I'm right here with you. And the dad said, you want me to sit in a submissive posture to my child? He needs stricter discipline.
Right.
And I said, well, think of it as a strategic posture to turn down his nervous system.
Well, you talk about, this goes back to the whole brain child, where you talk about the emotional desert and the emotional tsunami.
That's
so
right.
if you're both in that emotional tsunami, then we're not going to get anywhere.
That's exactly right. But something miraculous happens in this, and it's not just this family, it's thousands of families that I've heard from. What happened is, the dad thought it was kind of a dumb idea, and I didn't think he would do it. But a few weeks later, they came back, and he said, in a moment of desperation, I did it. He said, I don't think I did it very well. I think I wasn't very empathetic. I said something like, I can tell you're really mad, but I'll sit here with you.
Right.
He said, but it worked. My son calmed down faster than I've ever seen. He said, but something else happened. He said, I stayed calmer than I've ever been able to. And so then we could talk about the science that shows that the way you move your body, if you walk around like this all day, you're going to feel depressed. Or if you walk around breathing and moving really quickly, you'll start feeling anxious within a couple of minutes. So when you're yelling at your child and you're doing this with an aggressive posture, it actually activates the neural networks that are associated with those movements. But if you sit in a relaxed posture below someone's eye level, it activates a totally different neural network in the brain, and it allowed the dad to stay regulated. So sometimes we're not able to use our frontal lobes to say, okay, I need to be more mindful, I need to take a pause, or I need to get back to my hub, or I need to observe what's happening. Sometimes that's too far. You're too far gone yourself to go there. And so that's when we go more bottom up, more body based with our breathing, with sitting in a relaxed posture. Movement helps for a lot of people. Music can help. You say to our kids, I can't make a good decision right now. I'm too mad to be the kind of parent I want to be right now. I need a minute. And to put in music and sing or move our bodies to release some of that nervous system arousal. But that below the eye level thing and more of a bottom up body based kind of thing has been really, really a huge shift for a lot of families.
In a lot of meditations, Tina, they ask you, especially the Buddhist meditation, there's a certain type of meditation where they ask you to drop your gaze below eye level to bring less energy in. To sort of cut out the noise a little bit. And that helps quieten your emotional system, intellectual, physical system. It really starts to quieten it down. Because, the point is here to communicate. Right? And I teach about communication and effective communication. It's about communing, coming together. It's not about what I said and what you said, but how can I come together? How can I commune with my child? And then that goes into the social responsibility that you talk about, the community, and it sort of goes outward if we just take that moment to get that.
That's huge. And I think, what happens is if you start to get dysregulated, you start to go into the red zone or the blue zone, and you're going to get in trouble and someone's going to yell at you, it actually sends you there more quickly and you stay there longer and it happens more frequently. If you know instead that if I start to get dysregulated, someone's going to contain me and soothe me, what happens over time is there's less reactivity, there's less drama. Kids don't do that. But I think it's really important. We're spending a lot of time talking about soothing and staying regulated and seeing what's underneath the behavior and being empathetic. But we also, I think that creates a lot of fear in parents because they think, well, what about the behavior? What about this? And I think we have to also go there and say, all of this connection and empathy is what's priming our children's brains through connection and relationship to be receptive to the learning. So in that moment with JP, after I said, you hurt Luke, and he did this, and I say, you hurt him, then I could say, normally you wouldn't do this. This isn't typically what you would do. So what was happening for you? Well, I got frustrated, and what did that feel like in your body? And then how can you make things right with Luke? And what can you do differently next time? What will help you next time? So at the end of that interaction, I can go back to, have I been an effective disciplinarian? Did I teach? Yes. Did I build skills? Yes. Did we talk about insight and empathy and making things right? then guess what? I'm done. I have addressed the behavior.
You know, this ties in
Right on.
perfectly to what you say, have grace for ourselves
Yes.
and compassion for our kids. And I love that. And I keep that in my mind in any relationship. You know, having that grace for yourself is that moment of
Yeah.
self-regulation.
Yeah.
And then the compassion for the children, really, communing with them on
Yeah.
how are you feeling right now.
Yeah, and also, I think giving yourself enough space and time. One factor I think for especially us modern, the millennial parents, is the time factor, right? Where there's this race against time, and I think with this push mentality, we're missing out on a lot of these free times, these moments that will help us integrate and develop relationships. So I think as a community, as a conscious parent body community, we really need to reevaluate our priorities and really connect the dots and know that if we want to raise conscious children, if we are really here to raise conscious children and really a community, that we need to value those
Moments, connections,
right?
sure,
And
absolutely,
this is a constant
and we need to create
struggle.
those moments,
Yeah, because we live in a community and society, I think especially here in Los Angeles, where there is a lot of push for speed and multitasking and doing a lot.
Yeah.
And so
It's crowded.
It's crowded.
it really
it's
is,
crowded. So one thing I've been really mindful of is decluttering and cutting back.
Yeah, and then we have the
Saying
holidays,
no.
right? So,
Saying no.
so Tina, here we are, holidays,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You're organizing,
Right.
your organized life is out the door.
Yeah, right.
Your schedules are out the door. The kids are out of school, and you've got your shopping list in hand and kids at tow. What's your advice on how do you survive and thrive, right?
Well, the first thing...
And discipline.
Yeah, I mean, I think...
And no drama.
Exactly.
Please, can you do all of this for our
except
audience?
you're going to be with extended family, so there will be drama, no doubt. But, I think
You don't have to discipline them.
That's right. That's where you observe.
You
you're
just
like,
have to
that's
you
entertaining.
have to brew it
interesting.
inside of you.
Mindfulness.
That's right.
Take it out on your kids,
That's
right?
Well, I think, when people ask me, what is the most, of everything what is the most important thing you would say? I would say that there's two parts to it. The first is when our children are in distress, that's when they need us the most, to soothe and soothe and soothe. But it requires that we have the capacity to do it. So I would say especially applicable to the holidays, self-care, making sure we're getting sleep, we're getting exercise, we're having some time for ourselves and all of that, instead of just doing everything for everybody else, even if it's just a 5-minute moment of self-care, So taking care of ourselves, so our capacity is that we have a big, fat, healthy green zone, right?
Yeah.
The second is to not...
We hope.
We hope. The second is, and to monitor it. Watch yourself and be like, oh, my green zone's shrinking. What do I need right now?
Right.
I think the next part is to be thoughtful about our expectations. If the schedule is off, if our kids' sleep is off, they're getting a ton of sugar, there's a lot of stimulation, they're off
And
all
I
of
so
that.
agree with that, because I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to lead a scheduled life in an unscheduled time period.
Right.
Because the holidays, everybody's off schedule, and I think it's more stress for children and parents when we're trying to say it's 9 o'clock, it's 9 o'clock, it's 9 o'clock,
And if I can go into it with the expectation, like, okay, I know our schedule is off, I know we're traveling, I know my kids' schedule, we're doing these parties. So my expectation is I know my child may have a hard time tomorrow because she's going to be tired.
And you're not trying to put like a round
expectation-
peg into a square situation. You're
That's
really
right.
trying.
And then I can also say, okay, so what that's going to mean is because my child's going to be off, they're going to need more co-regulation.
Yeah.
So I think even planning in our minds, like, okay, tomorrow she's going to have a hard time, and what that means is I need to take a couple moments throughout the day to be proactive, to maybe sit and stop things and slow things down and rock and hold, or put my arm, or say, let's read. Just slowing these moments to co-regulate.
So slow down, everyone.
I know.
Take a deep breath throughout this holiday season. Embrace your children, soothe them, as well as do some self-soothing.
Yes.
And just be aware and keep your focus on the green zone. Thank you, Dr. Bryson, for joining us. Thank you, Roma.
Thank you so much.
And
Thank
it
you,
was
Dr.
such
Bryson,
a
for being
wonderful
here.
dialogue.
Thank you.
Until next time, everyone. Bye.
Bye.